So, dear friends, welcome to the first international meeting of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Club G42. It is a club from Timisoara, Romania, and this time is a special occasion because we have an international meeting in English, and we have some dear friends from all over the south of Romania, from the Balkans, and they will talk about science fiction and fantasy from their country. And in no particular order, but this order will be the order in which they will talk. I will welcome today Alma Zornić, Antonija Mežnarić, and Igor Rendić, Miloš Petrik, Bojan Ekselenski, Adrijana and Dragić Rabrenović, and Dimitrij Mihajlovski. This meeting has the following program. First, I will have a very short presentation about the first Romanian science fiction and fantasy film festival, the Galactic Imaginarium, which will be in September this year. After that, each of the representants of representing parties of the countries invited will have a short 10 minutes presentation about today's state of science fiction and fantasy in their country. The questions and answers will be taken after all the presentation, and we will have after the presentation and the question and answer session, freely session of discussion. So first I will share my screen. If I find the right window with my short presentation about the Science Fiction and Fantasy Film Festival. I hope that you can see the presentation. Everybody sees the presentation? Can, okay, thank you. And so this information is very important because the festival was due to start at the late of May, but because of the special situation with the COVID-19 pandemic, we were in the position to reschedule this festival. So the new festival date is from 23rd to the 27th September 2020. Our guest of honor is Miltos Ierolemo, which played the part of Syrio Forel from Game of Thrones. And we have some special guests here, Adriana and Dragić Rabrenović from Refesticon, Rachel Carey from Cinepunk Ireland, Jovan Ristic and his friend, I forgot the name, from the Festival of Serbian Fantastic Film. I'm sorry, the presentation, the name is not here in this presentation. It's Miroslav and something. Sorry for the lapse.
I think it's probably Miroslav Lakobria, but I'm
yes,
not sure.
yes, Miroslav Lakobria. Yes, that's the one. Thank you, Miloš, for the intervention. So from 23rd to 26th of September, it will be 4 nights from 9 o'clock, 4 nights of science fiction and fantasy film screenings in a drive-in cinema manner, because we don't know if the social distancing measures will be active in September. So it's better to be safe than sorry. So we'll put all the 4 film screenings in this kind of presentation, drive-in. And from the 26th to 27th September 2020, there will be 2 full days online programs in more venues than we had on the usual festival. Venue 1 will be the Zoom meeting, where will be the main line of the program, also the award gala in Sunday, and the meet, greet, and photo ops with the guest of honor. At the venue 2, it will be the Google Meet room with secondary lines of programs and the workshops in the film festival. The venue 3 will be the Discord virtual space with a channel dedicated to informing the participants about the programs and all kinds of other information important to the participants. It will be a tech support channel with persons who will offer information if the participants have technical issues participating at the panel and the panels. Each event will be followed by an after event discussion on the Discord channels, and there will be also networking channels in the Discord virtual space. The venue 4 is Facebook watch party, and we will have recorded video presentation that will be scheduled through all the 2 days of the festivals. And we will have also the YouTube venue where all the film festival will be presented in conjunction with the venue 1, which is the Zoom venue. All the information is available at the festival.galactic.one, our website, or at our Facebook page, TGI Film Fest. And the tickets, which are very cheap, will be around €4 for all 2 days, will be available at the Romanian website, which is selling tickets, bilete.ro/TGIFF. Also, the international participants have an English version of the site and can buy the tickets online. So we hope you will participate at the festival, and we are waiting for your participation. And this is all my presentation. And now we will start the presentation of our guest. Alma, please begin your presentation.
First of all, hello everyone. This is my daughter, Belma, and she's young SF fan. She speaks English and read better than me, and she have that honor that present Bosnia and Herzegovina literature in writers.
Hi. Hi. Okay, we're gonna share screen the presentation. It says the host disabled the share screening.
Okay, I will. Sorry. Let's. I think this is my bad, but I'll try to fix this. I will make you co-host so you can join your presentation now.
Okay. Okay. Right. Okay, so ancient myths are full of science fiction motifs. These motifs can be found in Arabic tales such as Thousand and One Nights, as well as in other traditions. Of course, the development of science in the 19th century influenced the symbiosis of the sci-fi on a higher level. So the novel Frankenstein by British author Mary Shelley is considered the first work of science fiction. The tradition of Bosnia and Herzegovina is full of stories, poems, and fairy tales in which are encouraged fantasy motifs. Yet, the science fiction genre has not found fertile ground in this country. Here, science fiction was born and slowly developed within Yugoslav science fiction literature scene. Historically, science fiction was viewed as a trivial genre that does not allow for higher or any artistic achievements. Such an attitude of literature criticism toward the sci-fi genre has hardly changed to this day. which discourages and drives writers away. The entire Yugoslav scene fiction was located in two centers, such as Belgrade in Serbia and Zagreb, Croatia. Writers from Bosnia and Herzegovina were encouraged to publish in one of these two cultural centers. On this occasion, let us mention three of them. Borivo Jurković, a native of Sarajevo, he was the founder and editor of high-quality science fiction magazine Sirius. He is considered the most important person for the development of Croatian science fiction. Mirko Ilić, a renowned comic book author, illustrator, and designer, is a native of Bijeljina. He first worked in Croatia and Italy, and then worked as illustrator in USA, in the Time, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. Ferit Muhić from Zavidović is a professor at the University of Skopje, and as a visiting professor, he has taught in universities in the United States and Malaysia. He published numerous theoretical works in science fiction and previous mentioned series. The author of first published Bosnian sci-fi story is Asad Jakupović. The story, titled Generation 23, was published on June 13, 1969 in Politikin Zabavnik magazine. Asad Jakupović was one of the founders and editor of magazine Galaxia from Belgrade, a magazine that is the successor of the former Cosmoplo. He is a member of Academy of Science and Arts of Republika Srpska. Another pioneer of Bosnian science fiction is Muhammad Muminović, a renowned astronomer. With his 15 books authored with field of astronomy, he is the most prolific writer of astronomical literature in the former Yugoslavia. Since 2008, he has been the president of Astronomical Society Orion from Sarajevo. The wars of Yugoslav in early 90s has also meant the breakup of Yugoslav literature scene. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, in that period, some of the most prominent authors of the Bosnian sci-fi and fantasy genre has appeared. Some of the writers are Adrijana Jašarević is an avid promoter of Bosnian culture heritage. In 1995, Jašarević started the first comics in school in Bosnia and Herzegovina. By the end of the 90s, he started the first Bosnian almanac of science fiction and epic fiction. He is the founder and organizer of festival in the footsteps of Bosnian Kingdom. Jašarević has published 15 books. Adrijana is author of first Bosnian book of epic fantasy in Hall of Mirrors and first Bosnian novel in epic fiction, The Unfinished World. He is the winner of 10 awards in Bosnia and Herzegovina and the region. For his contribution to fantastic literature, he was awarded the prestigious Golden Dragon Award. Anto Zitrum writes science fiction, epic fantasy, but he's also known as a writer of historical novels set in medieval Bosnia. Since 1996, he has published about 18 books of prose, 1 book of poetry, and 2 ethnologies and 3 plays. For his prolific work, he has received many awards in Bosnia and Herzegovina and region. He is a founder of regional fiction festival Skavakon Ivitis. He is a top management of Writers Association of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Veselin Gato debuted with sci-fi story magazine Prometheus. For sci-fi novel Ghetto, he received the Croatian Sfera Award. We would also like to mention Faruk Kučuk, the author of probably the first Bosnian science fiction novel for children, Stranger Guests. In addition for being the children's author, Kučuk also writes epic fantasy. He is a founder of annual festival Children's Art. The new millennium has brought us new names of Bosnian fantasy scene. In addition to Jašarević and Zirdum's project, regional festivals and competition are significant contributions. These events provide a platform for connections among regional writers and publishers, for them to exchange idea, experience, and achieve results in fantastic literature and art. In addition to several festivals in Croatia, Serbia, and Montenegro, we would especially like to highlight Refesticon from Belo Polje, Montenegro, which is growing into a regional festival with called Saras. The first of these are a dozen of writers who emerge as stars all over Bosnia and Herzegovina. However, without a central Bosnia and Herzegovina society of science fiction and fantasy, or at least a quality club to gather and provide support to these young and unstable writers, many of these starts to fade or stop writing or turn to some different kind of literature. Such a society of club much offer a clear vision and opportunity for quality project. At the fandom level, these are activities in the form of an association of science fiction fans in Sarajevo, Pulsar, and online community Stranac. Finally, let us mention the most present fiction writers in still this relatively spare fantasy sky of Bosnia and Herzegovina. We already mentioned of old practice of Bosnian authors gaining affirmation within literary scene of neighbors countries such as Vedrana Čačić and Adrian Sarajlija. Then we have Vedrana Čolić, who was born in Zagreb, but currently works and lives and writes short fantasy stories in Sarajevo. Then we have Aida Sečić-Nezirević, Ethem Panović, Mirnes Alipašić, Sacha Gina, Admir Delić, and then we have Sanela Piranić from Sarajevo. She writes for children and adults in the sci-fi genre. Her work has been published in Bosnia and Herzegovina and the region. In cooperation with Alma Zornić, Sanela manages an online sci-fi, fantasy, and horror community aimed at bringing together region authors and fans of this genre. Then we have Alma Zornić. She's from Sarajevo, writes short story in the best tradition of Bosnian storytelling. Although she writes both fantasy, epic, and science fiction, her work often carries elements of horror genre. She has been active writing for only about 5 years, but she has published over 20 stories in domestic and region collection. Alma's work have been recognized and rewarded repeatedly. She is a regular participant in the regional fiction festival. Signature of these lines, Dinko Osmančević is from Banja Luka. He is an author, writer of short science fiction and crime stories. He writes for Nezavisne novine and occasionally is a journalist. He also is author of the collection Big Bang. He has published short stories in about 50 domestic and regional collection and numerous magazines and journals. Dinko has received multiple awards. There are probably some other names of Bosnia and Herzegovina fiction that are not covered in this short survey. With an apology about them on another occasion. We want to thank the organizer of this meeting.
That's all.
Thank you very much. It was a very nice presentation. I didn't thought that so much authors are right now writing science fiction, fantasy, and horror in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Yes.
All the questions, if you have for the presenters, please write them down, and we will have a session of question and answers after all the presentation is done. So now I invite Antonija and Igor to make their presentation.
Hi.
Hi. Yes, Antonija will be doing the presentation from her computer.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you see it, everyone?
Yes, it's okay. We see the presentation.
Okay.
You see the presentation? Good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me. Good. Okay. So, hello everyone. I am Igor. This is my colleague Antonija, and we will be talking about science fiction and fantasy in Croatia today. So, let's begin. We can't talk about science fiction in Croatia without talking about science fiction fans, and we can't talk about science fiction fandom without talking about conventions. Fortunately for science fiction, there are many conventions in Croatia. Currently, there are over 10 active annual conventions, providing entertainment and a great meeting place for the hundreds and hundreds of Croatian science fiction fans. We've made this handy little map. Now, these are only those conventions that are currently active. There have been others in the past, but unfortunately, they are no longer taking place. Now, no one knows for sure how many science fiction fans there are in Croatia. Many people that are fans probably never have, nor never will, come to a convention or an event or even join a science fiction society. However, largest cons in Croatia, which are Recon, Sphericon, and Liburnicon, have had over 1,000 visitors annually. Sphericon in particular has recently begun crossing the 2,000 visitor mark. Croatian conventions, for the most part, do not have a specific focus on a certain media or subgenre of science fiction and fantasy. Most Croatian cons offer programming about everything from sci-fi literature to movies to games. Some conventions will often have guests of honor, and a very large percentage of those guests of honor have been famous and popular science fiction writers. Here are just a few of those great names that have visited Croatian cons in the past decades. Some of them have actually been guests of honor several times and at different conventions. So yes, Croats like science fiction and they like to read science fiction. Unfortunately, most Croats who like to read science fiction read only foreign writers. Most have never read or even don't want to try reading Croatian authors. Unfortunately, this is partly due to people in general feeling that foreign is better, which is an attitude that I'm certain most of you have encountered as well. But many Croats also don't like reading Croatian science fiction because they expect it might be bad or boring. This is mostly because their only other exposure to Croatian literature was in elementary and high school, and you will agree that required reading in schools has always been a prime killer of the love of reading in anyone. But while the number of people who read Croatian science fiction is much smaller than the number of people who read science fiction in general, this does not mean that there is just a few Croatian writers. There are in fact many Croatian writers, and here are just some of the currently active and popular ones. Places where such writers, both new and established, can be published are also many. Several conventions have their own annual anthologies. Spherocon's anthology is given to each and every visitor, so it's certainly the most widely disseminated anthology, while the annual anthology by Fantastic Fiction Festival is the most popular one among writers, since getting your story published there means you get to spend a weekend in Istria during the festival and enjoy free accommodation and food. There are also fanzines, which have been a staple of Croatian science fiction since its beginning, obviously. Currently, the most long-lived fanzine is Sfera Society's Parsek. Many Croatian publishing companies will occasionally publish Croatian science fiction, but their main output are still translated and domestic mainstream novels, crime novels, and romance novels. However, there is Hangar 7, which is a small Croatian publisher focused exclusively on science fiction literature, both foreign and domestic. Founded in 2011, Hangar 7 has, for the past decade, been making its name first with a popular magazine called Sirius B, as an homage to a Yugoslavian science fiction magazine called Sirius, and then with an impressive line of both translated books and books by current Croatian authors. Some of them you can actually see on this image. There is also a new publishing project that we would like to mention. It's called Alienus Books. Now, their business model is a little unusual for Croatia. You see, all proceeds from the sales of their current book go straight into financing the production of the next title in line. All in all, we currently in Croatia have four annual short story anthologies and one literary magazine for science fiction and fantasy called Ubik that publishes twice a year and is also the only place that also publishes essays and literary papers about science fiction. And now Antonija is going to take over for a bit.
Well, this year's pandemic caused, among other things, the postponing of both the various conventions and their printed anthologies that Igor just now mentioned. Because of this lack of places to publish, a group of us in Rijeka started an online publishing event called the Decameron 2020, Stories from the Quarantine. The idea was to write and publish a story a day on the internet. We put a call for submissions and didn't limit the stories to just science fiction and fantasy. However, the majority of published stories were genre stories, and many from already established Croatian genre writers actually published their stories on this blog. But also we are happy to say that some new writers, also including teenagers, wrote and shared their stories with us. While most submissions were from Croatia, 2 were from Serbia, and 1 was from Bosnia and Herzegovina, the already mentioned Adnadin Jašarević from the previous presentation. All of the stories were published on the blog and then promoted on Facebook with visuals and posts, and we are currently preparing an ebook collection of these stories. Then Croatian writers have been leaving a mark outside Croatia as well for some time now. Here are just some of the novels that have been translated into foreign languages, some from English to Polish and Czech and so on. With so many active writers and many places for them to publish their work, it won't surprise you to hear that we have 2 literary awards for best published science fiction and fantasy fiction, Sfera and Artifact. The Sfera award is much older, from 1981, while the Artifact is younger. Both have juries composed of readers, editors, writers, and really everyone who wants to join, who then read everything that was published in the previous year and choose the best work in the various categories. Some of the work of fiction wins both of the awards, but for the most part, there is very little overlap. Then Igor.
Now, writers aren't the only thing Croatian science fiction can brag about. We also have a few artists that we are now going to mention. Many artists, actually, that are today highly sought after by everyone, from comics giants like DC Comics and Marvel Comics, to French comics publishers and companies such as Wizards of the Coast. Some of these amazing artists include Miloš Petrik, Goran Suđuka, Goran Parlov, Lidija Šejić, and her husband, Stjepan Šejić, and the amazing work of Zdenko Bašić. And we can't talk about art in Croatian science fiction without mentioning probably what is the biggest name of all, Igor Kordej. Now, he has found great success in both Croatia and the world. His book covers in Croatia are legendary, and those editions that have his covers are now very coveted collector's items. Here you can see his cover that he did for the first book of The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. Moving on, film has always been an expensive medium in Croatia. Still, we do have several science fiction film projects that we can be proud of. Now, there's Zovko Teleport and The Last Serb in Croatia, 2 films by director Predrag Ličina that take a bitingly satirical approach to Croatia and the world. And there is Slice of Life, a film that deserves all the praise it received at various international festivals. It is a short film, heavily inspired by Blade Runner, and it was made by only 2 guys, literally in their garage, using makeshift sets and models instead of CGI. Croatia has also continued the long tradition of international film co-productions that started in Yugoslavia. Recently, several hits have been filmed partially in Croatia, including Star Wars: The Last Jedi, where the city of Dubrovnik played parts of the casino planet, and of course the HBO's hit series Game of Thrones was filmed at various locations along the Croatian coast. And we do science fiction theater as well. These are photos from 3 different staged productions by the Cygnus Society. Now, they are a small group of science fiction fans and theater enthusiasts that performed 3 plays at 3 Sphericon conventions in a row. These plays were, in order, a flash mob adaptation of Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, a stage and video combined adaptation of Once Warm with Feeling, which is a musical episode of the TV show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and an original play set in the world of the television series Doctor Who. Back to Antonija.
Then we also have a growing and vibrant cosplay community. Not only do we have some amazing cosplayers, but also the cosplay show is probably the most popular events at a convention. You can always be certain of 2 things. That is that no matter how small a convention, there will always be a cosplayer, and people will always come to the cosplay show. Some of our cosplayers are also trying to become professionals in the way of branding and monetization, and the most famous one, Tana Stasny, already is. She's the go-to person for a lot of cosplayers, especially new ones. She makes and sells costumes and commissions, has her own shop, and etc.
Now, there's another thing that happens when you combine costumes, acting, and geeks, and that is LARP. Live-action role-playing has been very popular in Croatia among all age groups. It has become especially popular at Croatian cons due to mostly effort and work done by the Terrible Creations. Terrible Creations are a small company that organizes LARPs for a living. Now, they don't do only conventions. They also organize LARPs for company team buildings, for birthday parties, for various events that may or may not be science fiction or geek related, and they even do bachelor and bachelorette parties. And they also have a bar. This is the Crni Mačak, or Black Cat Cafe, which is a geek and science fiction fandom oriented place where they often have theme parties, hold science fiction and fantasy quizzes, and can serve you science fiction inspired cocktails. Now, we've shown you the many faces of science fiction in Croatia. But if you had to describe its essence, what would we say? Antonija?
Well, if we're talking about literature, then, well, at first I will say that it has a really rich history, but that would be a long lecture on its own, so I'm going to focus on what's happening today. There are several popular subgenres of science fiction in Croatia today. First off, there's historical fantasy, inspired by anything from medieval ages to the Uskok Wars against Venice to the Balkans in the 19th century and most recently Yugoslavia. History has also been an inspiration for Croatian science fiction. We have alternate histories and steampunk stories. There has been a lot of dystopias, especially in the recent years, following the global trend. And of course, it comes hand in hand with post-apocalypse, and also there's a lot of novels and stories from other subgenres that have elements of dystopia. There's, we could say, preference for pessimistic and cynical works, but it's not all doom and gloom, of course, but there is a big suspicion regarding politics and society, late-stage capitalism and consumerism. It's not just ours, it's mostly, like I said, a global trend. And we have a lot of space stuff. If it's not fantasy, then it's probably in space, and sometimes it's both. Secondly, we need to mention themes and motives that appear in Croatian sci-fi that aren't that usual in Anglo-American sci-fi literature. Since the early 90s, there has been a strong opposition to the old perception that only Americans can go to space. Therefore, many stories are based in Croatian culture and on Croatian identity, even if they happen to take place in alternative universe or deep space. Here I have to mention Davor Šišović, Croatian editor and journalist, who really pushed this "we need to write about local places and folklore" attitude, and many writers listened. The Fantastic Literature Festival in Istria is actually the direct result of that idea. Its annual anthology has a different theme every year, and this theme is always connected to the Istrian town that will be hosting the festival that year. For example, Istria has some very famous, very old stories about giants, the most famous being Veli Jože. So one year the anthology was dedicated to stories about giants. Of course, the stories don't have to be set in Istria to be published, but due to Šišević's local attitude and the willingness of Croatian writers to try something new, the festival's anthologies created a really specific type of story. If a short story is whimsical, probably heavy on the comedy, located in Istria or featuring Istrian folklore, cuisine, history, or people, it was probably written for this festival. But really, there are a lot of elements from Croatian folk tales, legends, and towns, histories that play the important part in our contemporary literature. Mostly there are stories about Strigas and Krsniks, shape-shifting nemesis. We have a lot of folk tales about them, and a lot of contemporary writers like to write about them. It's probably because they're really cool. I mean, a mix between witches, shapeshifters, and vampires. So what's not to like about that? And then the novel of Flumen Obscura, based on the history and legends of the town of Rijeka, also features zvončari, or bellmen, which are men who chase away evil spirits by ringing bells and wearing scary, mostly animal masks or crown flowers, but that group is not particularly scary. That are also gods and creatures from Slavic and more specifically old Croatian mythology, such as Peron, Morana, Moras, and similar. We even have one of the earliest documented mentions of vampire in Europe, Jure Grando, our own vampire from the 17th century that plagued a small town of Kringa in Istria for years before they finally managed to stake him and behead him. It's not unusual for Jure to appear in Croatian sci-fi and fantasy. So overall, it's not unusual for sci-fi and fantasy stories to be connected to the history of our towns, villages, and communities, and to draw inspiration from them. And in the end, we would like to just mention that this year, Rikon is hosting Eurocon, named Futuricon. It will be in October, like you can see on the slide. So that's that from us. Here are some helpful links that we provided. Because I mean, all of our publishers, associations, and conventions have a presence on Instagram and Facebook, so find us and follow us. To finish as a YouTuber.
Thank you very much. A very dense and information presentation from our friends from Croatia. Now I invite Miloš Petrik to have his presentation.
Yes, I assume we need to unmute. All right, so I will try and be brief. Is sharing on?
Yes.
All right, so I will not go so far into the past as my respected Bosnian friends have. Only the 19th century to begin with the Serbian story of sci-fi. We have these three people. We have Dragutin Ilić, Lazar Komarčić, and George Lobačev, or Yuri Pavlovich Lobačev. I will just go quickly over the sort of the literary traditions that these people have started. Dragutin Ilić wrote what is generally considered to be the first sci-fi play at all, called Posle Milion Godina. Lazar Komarčić was the first Serbian to write a sci-fi novel, and George Lobačev started the Serbian comic book tradition. And some of these traditions are still alive today. So these are just a couple of years. So in 1889, Dragutin Ilić published After a Million Years, but because he had the very famous poet brother who wrote mainstream poetry and not like weird sci-fi dramas, he was usually forgotten, or rather largely forgotten, or barely mentioned in by his contemporaries, insofar as I understand. Lazar Komarčić's An Extinguished Star was published in 1907, and it's a weird sort of occult or spiritualist sort of sci-fi. It was not, it's not what we'd consider like really modern sci-fi today, but Lobačev was very much in the vein of the contemporary comic book scene, as you can see probably from some of these pictures, and also what I note very prominent in my Croatian and Bosnian interlocutors, also very much in the folkloric tradition, because even though Lobača was Russian, he emigrated to Serbia after the revolution, and he did start our comic book scene in a sense. And fast forwarding to after the Second World War, we had the first fantasy epic and the only one, insofar as I can tell. It was the Magic Sword by Vojislav Nanović, who wrote and directed it. It was released in 1950. It was released internationally, played in the United States of America to very, very poor reviews, but did play. And it's sort of it's based off the folkloric fairy tale tradition of, well, Serbian folk tales and Slavic mythology and so on and so forth. And it's a theme that's the running undercurrent of our sci-fi scene, or sci-fi and fantasy scene even now. But it was a big budget film for the time. And it was one of the first films that was produced after the Second World War. But then suddenly, like, there was no interest in continuing this sort of tradition. Vojislav Nanović went on to direct other films, and nobody's picked up his mantle. In the 60s and 70s, we have the Kentauro Centaur publications. This is what I read as a child and teenager. So they published all the contemporary science fiction, and it was mainly the edition was mainly edited by a reasonably famous person, probably our greatest claim to fame. You can see him here on the right, Dr. Zoran Živković. He's of course, he's known for his speculative fiction prose, for which he won the World Fantasy Award, the only Serbian writer ever to win a so prestigious an award. And he also, other than introducing whole generations of sci-fi readers to contemporary sci-fi classics, he also studied sci-fi in terms of literary science, and wrote, or rather compiled, the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction, which you can see on the left. And that's, now we've moved up to the 90s. Promise I'd be brief. We now have continuity from Lazar Kombačić and Ljubomir Damjanović, sorry, Dragutin Ilić. We have continuity in the Lazar Kombačić Science Fiction Society, or internationally known as the Science Fiction Association of Serbia. And the informal sort of comic book school, which you can see in the very, very small picture, because you couldn't find any better, is named after George Lobačev. Now, the Lazar Kombačić Club has their own fanzine called Emitor, and they have also published several collections of short stories, including, I am proud to say, my own, which you can't see here because, well, I didn't think it was right to include it, and also organized a Beocon, which was at the time, I believe, the largest convention of sci-fi fans. It had several incarnations. There was one or two in the 80s, I think, maybe a couple. There was one in early 2000s, 2006, I think, and it was recently revived in 2015, and had such luminaries as guests of honor as Dave McKean, the comic book artist Norman Spinrad, the sci-fi author, and the fantasy author Stephen Erickson. Much of the original Bearcons were organized by the Lazar Commentary Society, but the last incarnation was also organized by probably the largest fan association in Serbia, which is Sakura Bana. You can see the tiny little logo over here. I really didn't think this through very much, but they started as anime fans and are now basically like the go-to place for general geekdom in Serbia. They do not have their own publishing tradition so far, but maybe there is something to come from that. Also, you can see here the Anomalia short story collection, which was again started by Lazar Kombačić and only had 2 issues. Maybe they will resume that, I hope so. And further, recently we have had the first feature-length animated film by Alex Dragić called Editia, or Edith and I. Alex Dragić is an alumnus of the George Lobachev comic book school, which is why I mentioned it. So it's a long tradition. And another alumnus also was the sculptor of this really adorable fake platypus baby, which went viral over the internet because everybody thought it was real. My very good friend and colleague, I'm proud to say, Vladimir Matić-Kurilov did this. Not a real platypus baby, unfortunately. But insofar as the current literary publishing scene, I've decided not to mention that many names. I know a lot of people who are in some way or other involved in the publishing scene. I hope nobody gets offended, but I've decided to concentrate on seems to be most popular in terms of sales. The sort of the folkloric or fantasy tradition is really, really strong, and the Serbian audiences really, really like it. Of course, much of the big hits, such as A Song of Ice and Fire, are translated and are very popular, but out of the Serbian writers, I have to say Dejan Stojljković and his Konstantinovo Raskršće serial, Aleksandar Tešić and his Kosingas, The Order of the Dragon, and his sci-fi work 2084, obviously referencing the George Orwell's 1984 dystopian sci-fi work, and Goran Skrobonya, who's mainly known for his horror fiction, but also some weird alternative history sci-fi. And out of the 3, my personal favorite, if I may say so. And we don't see a lot of like really hard sci-fi. The 2084 out of these is a notable exception. But that too is an attempt at sort of political dystopian fiction rather than hard sci-fi. And I am sad to say that does not seem to be any great public interest in sci-fi here currently. Of course, that may change. Insofar as the future is concerned, we don't know. I expect the heroic fantasy fiction, folkloric fiction trend will continue, because that has been popular for over 100 years here, as I've said. But we haven't had a feature-length motion picture. And maybe, well, for 70 years. So maybe we will have a feature-length motion picture. Maybe we will have another feature-length animated film. I haven't even mentioned, because, well, my presentation is mainly Belgrade-centered because I live here. But there are also other fan associations that do their own thing. You have mentioned, Darius, the Fantasy and Science Fiction Film Festival of Serbia, who are your guests and our friends, obviously. they have been having regular sort of programs every year here in Serbia. I haven't mentioned the Foot and Tide of Novi Sad, the fan association that has a very active and very interesting podcast which deals in science fiction, but also popular science. I have mentioned Sakurabana, the anime and manga fan association. They have a manga workshop, so maybe the next big name in manga will come from Serbia. We can't tell. And a new fan association, AVKF, or Autostoperski Vodič kroz Fantastiku, referencing Douglas Adams in his Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, have also started their own publishing imprint. And also mainstream publishers have been publishing writers who have made a name in sci-fi or horror or fantasy as either in mainstream fiction or as sort of like a fairy tale collections and so on and so forth. So that there have been inroads into mainstream publishing, but little interest, which is growing, and I am hopeful about that. What I'm very sad to say is that the oldest and the most prestigious, I feel, science fiction association, the Lazar Komorčić Association, is no longer awarding their eponymous award for which they have for short fiction, long fiction, and translation and other categories. And I hope they resume the practice soon, because I feel if they are listening, I know some of them are. I feel that a scene needs recognition, and that recognition can come from a literary award that sort of has merit, makes sense, and has tradition. And with that, I will conclude my presentation, but I remain here obviously for questions and comments and so on. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Miloš. This was the presentation about Serbian science fiction and fantasy. Some of the information I knew, some is of course new for me, and it was very entertaining. So I invite Bojan to have his presentation.
Hello from Slovenia. First, I have little computer accident, and I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, and I was quick right for this. Slovenia's science fiction land. First, double regret for my very broken English. Slovenia received its first serious science fiction novel as early as 1891. It is novel 4000, written by Ivan Taucher. It is a novel about time travel written in the way such stories are written back then. But I will not talk about history. Let's leave that to historians. During former Yugoslavia, especially in the 1980s, in Slovenia, worked in several science fiction fan clubs, and high quality translation of serious science fiction literature we have printed. Large publishing houses also printed works by local authors, such as Vít Pečiak, Poncer, Rodošek, Remec, and many others. Everything died out out at the time of the foundation of independent Slovenia. Larger publishing houses have stopped supporting local authors. Amateur clubs have disappeared, and apart from a brief episode of Prisma Society, we don't have a classic amateur fan club like Sfera in Zagreb. We do not have a convention like Recon or Sferacon. We tired Sikon in 2019, but we was stay without appropriate response. Since 2013, we have a convention Namei Nevidnega, which is more like Omixcon. The exactly organized and executed one-day convention focuses on cosplay and Americans fantasy words. Domestic science fiction and fantasy literature, however, are rather marginal. The convention also has a website in Slovenian and English. The Meteorita convention in Jesenice is closer to Slovenian science fiction creations. The focus there is on the connection between science fiction and science, and Slovenian science fiction literature also play an important role. There we will award the only literary prize for fantastic literature, the Supernova prize. This is also a one-day event for horror lovers. The Grozma Wine and Film Festival, which has a long tradition and takes place in Ljutomer, is certainly important on a global scale. Last year, this Grozma Fiction and Comics Festival for the first time was organized in Ormož by the same team as aforementioned film festival. There is also the possibility of participation of Slovenian authors. In this year, since 2019, Italia Literary Society organized Fun-Fest Slovenia Festival of Fantasy Literature. It is only event primarily aimed at writers and literature. The main and regular guest is the world famous professor Zoran Živković. The society publish Supernova, currently the only printed magazine for fantasy literature in Slovenia, which is entering its 5th years of publication this year. The editorial staff accept foreign and domestic works and priority given to domestic authors. Supernova is the only print medium in Slovenia where Slovenian authors have the opportunity to publish his works. The magazine is currently still free of charge, so authors do not receive honorars. The funds received only covers the printing costs. Members of magazine Literary Society are also the team that published the only serious Slovenian portal for science fiction, znanstvena-fantastika.se. It's an important part of the Slovenian science fiction in these days. Domestic science fiction books are more or less self-published or published by small publishing houses like ProAndi. Large publishers avoid domestic authors and prefer to publish foreign works. The number of authors is quite limited, like fingers on my arm. Every year is a maximum of publishing works, 3, 4, or 5, never more. In big problem in Slovenia is the fact that Slovenian fans cannot buy Slovenian science fiction books in Slovenian bookstores. Bookstores and large publishing houses fully support the foreign publishing industry, and the part of the fandom follows this trend of supporting foreign countries. I think an important step in development of science, Slovenian science fiction literature was last year's literature competition organized by a renewed magazine Časopis za kritiko znanosti. Competition for the best science fiction story in Časopis za kritiko znanosti in March 2019, an open call for science fiction short stories was published. The text of the call was not unusual in itself. That was unusual about the competition is that it was written by an academic journal for the critic of science, TKZ in Slovenian abbreviation. The journal is one of the oldest academic journals in the country. Its first issues date from 1973, and it was been published regularly since then. Its special feature is that it publishes thematic science section and is very well embedded inside society. It reflects the current situation and deals with important but often neglected dilemmas. This reflection comes in different shapes and sizes. That is why the journal is here. We have only few authors: Tanja Mencin, Marko Vitas, Andrej Ivanusha, Domen Mezek, that is published his first part of saga Ilonika this year, Teja Gale, and Bojan Ekselenski, and some writers write short stories, but we have very small number of authors. This is all.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not very good speaker.
Not a problem. We managed to understand you. It's very interesting that each country has its particularities. And this is very interesting because, as we all know, all were back in time part of the Yugoslavian community of republics. And we thought from outside that all this culture is an homogeneous culture, but unfortunately, or maybe it's a good thing that each country has its particularities. So now I invite Adrijana and Dragić Rabrenović to talk about the science fiction and fantasy in Montenegro.
Hello to everyone. Greetings from Montenegro. If you please would share my screen.
Let's make you I think, no, you have the permission to share the screen.
Share.
You have share screen down, put your mouse pointer down, and you have the
okay. I'm doing
the
better.
menu. Okay, yes, it's good.
You can
now.
see.
Yes, I see. Yes.
It's the Festicon homepage.
Yes.
For those people who are not involved with all of our activities, I can say that this is the official page of Refesticon. It is a festival of regional fantasy convention, which is organized in Montenegro for the first time before 8 years. This year we should have 8 festival, but because this situation with COVID-19, it is postponed for the autumn of this year 2020. We will probably have festival in October. The topic, as probably most of you probably know, is about Illyrian. And we actually postponed also call for submissions, which will last, I think, up to half of September this year. And all activities actually are in process now. For example, yesterday we have finished a first part of radio shows about famous writers from the region, and it's called the bestseller. Miloš was one of the participants of that radio shows, also Alma Zornić, and I think at the beginning of the that shows Dragić was also one of the participants. This year we have a lot of plans, but I hope that we will manage to do everything what actually we have on the paper. We have a few segments of that festival. We have a competition for people who are already famous in this genre, and people from the region, and for the people who are maybe not so famous, who will start to write first stories, I think, on young people, especially students, even from elementary school and high school. That is because our goal is to make this genre to be more popular, especially here in Montenegro, because we are the first to do things like this in Montenegro. As you can see, maybe before 30 minutes in Croatia, you have a very large number of festivals, conventions, and so on. And in Montenegro, we have only this one, Refesticon. I would like to say now more about structure of this festival. As you can see at our web homepage, up to now, we had 7 editions of festival from 2013 up to 2019. And as one of the main goals is to publish a collection of short stories. You can see here on the web page, they all have the names of the topics from that particular age. But except that, we have some special editions, like here, as you can see, books which were dedicated to our famous writers, not only from Montenegro, but also from the region. Here we also have information about all previous competitions, information about authors, and also we have multimedia category where we have saved all our audio and video materials and photos from all the events which we organized during the years, and also a very rich archive of the photos from all previous years. I accidentally opened this category. Most of you know Dragić. He is an organizer. He is here with me. But I want to say that he is the organizer of this whole festival, Refesticon, and it is his original idea. So we are some kind of his partners, and he is the #1 for this festival, and our ideas are his own ideas. I would like just to say few more words about our festival, and then Dragić can continue with maybe more detailed informations about our activities. I want just to say that we are pretty connected with social media. We want to improve our visibility through Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, through this website, then through audio platforms such as SoundCloud. And one of the achievements, which is, I think, very important, and we can be proud on that fact, is that at the beginning, we didn't have any author from the Montenegro except Dragić. And now, after 8 years, we have 27 young authors which are interested in writing, not only young, but also older people, which are interested in writing different aspects of this genre, not SF fantasy, but in Montenegro, we are particularly interested in epic fantasy. And that is a very important thing to stress, that huge number of authors which shown in the last few years here in Montenegro. There is a lot to say. For example, I would only like to open program from the last year, maybe for the people who were not able to come to Montenegro. And this is only a 1-day program. And here you can see following days. Refesticon usually lasts 3, 4, even 1 year it lasts 10 days. So it's a very huge organization with a lot of events and a lot of people who are included in all these activities and the whole project. Now I would like to give the floor to the Dragić. He is the main man and he will probably explain best all his ideas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Adrijana. Thank you, Darius. I hope you can hear me now because we have...
unfortunately, there is an echo.
We have a lot of...
yes, now it's okay.
Stuff to present now, but because of time, I'm going to say thank you again, Darius, for organizing this presentation, this meeting, and also I want to thank
Unfortunately, Dragić has some problem with the connection, I think, because also Adrijana has left the room. No, Adrijana is still here with us. Adrijana, first of all, I would like you to stop the screen sharing. You can go up with your mouse pointer and click on stop sharing. And maybe if Dragić has the problem with the connection, maybe you will let him talk from your computer. I think both of them have problem hearing me or making some adjustments with their connection. Maybe we will resume their presentation after they will sort out their technical problems. So I invite Dimitrij Mihajlovski to have the presentation about science fiction and fantasy in his country. Dimitrij? Okay. Let's see if I can close Adrijana presentation.
Okay.
Oh, I think Dragić is back with us. Dragić?
Okay, I'm here.
Yes, you are here, but we have some echo from your audio. I think you have two connections nearby, you and Adriana, and that's why.
Yes.
Yes. Maybe it's better to Adriana to just leave the room, and then we will hear you better.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear now?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay. I mentioned that we have good cooperation with our partners from region, and on that we organize our festival, regional festival, because we have collect stories and authors and festivals in Bijelopolje and Montenegro. But our idea is to promote our writers from Bijelopolje, from Montenegro, and our cultural heritage, because we have a lot of stories in the medieval time. We have a lot of legends, myths, and epic fantasy in Montenegro, and we have some writers from the beginning of the 50s. One of the first was Čedo Vuković with novel for kids, Almighty Eye. It was science fiction from the beginning of the 50s after Second World War. And after that we have Milenko Ratković. He was one of the short stories writers from Montenegro, known as writers for the kids. After that we have Slobodan Vukanović, writers who have experience in participate in Eurocon in 18 years in Eurocon. After that we have a lot of writers, but we don't have a scene about fantasy or SF, but our festival changed it, and we have now, Adriana mentioned, 27 publishing stories about only writers from Montenegro. Among that, we have a lot of stories from all region, and we now accept a lot of stories about Illyrian, because that topic is something something connect us, and we on that common heritage we want to unite whole region and want to unite writers. I want to mention that we have a Golden Dragon, that is award for the one person from the region, or the last one was from Italy, one person who is who have a who promote fantasy, and who is a writer or actor from the fantasy or science fiction. I hope now we have some little presentation for this meeting, and I call everyone from other countries, also from Romania, to connect with us on Facebook or Instagram, also on our website, and maybe to come in Bielopolje in October, I hope.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dragić. Thank you, Adrijana.
Can you now start Adriana again? Again, video.
Yes, yes, of course.
Okay.
So after this presentation, we will have our last presentation from Dimitrij. Please, Dimitrij, go ahead with your presentation.
All right. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I hope you can hear me well.
Yes.
I'm Dimitrij. I'm a volunteer in Vision, the science fiction center in Macedonia. And unfortunately, it's the only one association that operates today in my country. I did make a small PowerPoint. It's a brief, it won't take time. I would like to share it with you. So I hope you can see this.
Yes, we are seeing your presentation.
We don't need this. The very beginning, I don't want to talk much about history. I just made a few key points, like important moments that actually are important, and the very reason of what we have today, actually. So on the left side, you can notice I chose the Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift, and although it was published way early in 1726, the first Macedonian publication of that book came in 1950. Now, this is a key moment because we recognize it as the first science fiction publication of foreign author, and we can compare it to the first Macedonian produced science fiction publication, which was in 1957 by Jordan Leof, and it was titled Disappeared World. And it's in fact a compilation of short stories. Now, furthermore, since that publication of Gulliver's Travels in 1950 to 1990, we pretty much had around 100 translated works of other artists, other writers. And as you well know, that's a very few in number. So the science fiction as a genre was not, didn't have a great impact in Macedonia at that time. While since the publication of, as you can see here, in 1957, later we had over 50 literature pieces, as well as theory in the science fiction published in Macedonia. So it's not huge in number as it is maybe in quality, I would say. And from all those authors, I would like to pinpoint a few of them, like Ljubomir Donski, Stojmir Simjanovski, Mile Kostov, Ljubomir Mihajlovski, Ferit Muhic. Also, there is one particular moment in these publications, and that is the Great Adventure novel by Lazan Umovski that was published in 1959. And as the current factography suggests in Macedonia, this 1959 piece was the beginning in Macedonian science fiction. However, there was this visual artist Vasilija Popović Čičo, who actually illustrated the Jules Verne's reprints that actually date in the early 50s of the 20th century, so predecessed the novel we said. Furthermore, I would like to continue to the social effect, I would say, not just the artistic way, but also the social impact of what these artworks intended to do. So I would start with this pulsar, and it's the first science fiction club in Macedonia that was founded in 1983. And the idea was born by 3 members, Goran Šundev, Ljubomir Mihajlovski, and Vladimir Semonovski. And this was a brief moment in the science fiction history of Macedonia because, as you can see, Goran and Vladimir were from Skopje, while Ljubomir was from Veles. And when they had this idea, the original idea as planned was to make a club that will operate on the whole territory of Macedonia, but in a way that kind of distrained, and it went to another way. And at the very end, this club was operating only in the Skopje area. So, however, it was not that unsuccessful, but as you can see, it was like a continuity from the overall Yugoslav scene back then, science fiction scene, originating from the science fiction club Sfera that was from Zagreb. And when the club was founded and started their activity, it even had this Yugoslav convention that brought it here in Skopje, and they were the hosts of the Yukon convention that happened in 1987. And as a result of that convention and that hosting, they were able to make the second issue of the USFO, the science fiction magazine that was in a way collaborative work of all the science fiction clubs back then. So it had a brief moment of activities, but as an exceptional members, I would really like to pinpoint out here Bashkim Ademi and Samet Nuhiu. And that as it is, later, actually parallel, I would say, in the same time, like later in 1985, the Vision Science Fiction Center was formed. And as you can notice, it was one of the idea givers of the pulsar. And I mean, the original idea that happened from Ljubomir Mihajlovski actually came true in Veles in 1985. And it was originally, I mean, appeared as a club, as it was like a general idea back then in Yugoslavia to start as a club for a science fiction lovers, appreciators, or people who respect the science fiction as a genre. And later in 1992, it grew into the what is known today as the Science Fiction Center of Macedonia. And it is still going on, and we're very proud of it, me as a volunteer there especially, that it had a very rich, actually very rich number of activities in many areas too, like educational and promotional activities. And here I have brief, I mean, like bullet points of what actually Vision does. And you can see that throughout that activity, many new authors found their way to express themselves, and not just in a written form, but also in all other artistic forms. So, as you can see in the printing area, the Vision had this first science fiction magazine that appeared, and so far it has 21 issues, but which is a very great opportunity for new authors to represent their views on the science fiction genre and publish their short stories or poems. And also there were on few occasions a summer school for science fiction, like summer camps, where they lasted longer than just for one session, like I'm talking weeks or even months here, that there were these teachings of the history of the science fiction in general, and the all kind of forms that can the artists can express themselves. And at the very end of that summer schools, there was always some sort of a printed brochure or magazine, or that any print form that contained everything that was produced during that school. And also the Vision, as you can see later, it had these short courses on science fiction separated from the summer schools. And these were very good combinations for, and a great advantage for the new authors, because they had this place, I would say, where they could be published side by side to the already established authors, and that kind of helped them to reevaluate themselves, or to see or even compare criticism, so that would eventually help them grew as authors. Also, other field of the Vision activities is the cinematography, where in 1997 there was this first Macedonian science fiction movie, and it's especially important is to point out that it was totally done in production by the Science Fiction Center, Vision. The title is Where Are You Going, Man? And it had, in the same year it was made, it had this appearance on the International Media Festival in Košice, Slovakia. So that's on the cinema, but still on the media and I mean multimedia field. It also happened to have a radio show. So Vision was active on the radio network with Messages from the Future, which is a radio show hosted by the founder, Dimitrij Mihajlovski, and it was a weekly show and quite long if you consider the other shows. It was a 1-hour radio show and aired from 1995 until 2006. And in the same time, I mean, was also active as an organization in the television field with the film and science fiction weekly TV show. That the title was The Film and the Science Fiction, that aired in, since, I mean, from 2003 until 2005. And least, but in a way most important to us is the convention we have, and it is the only one science fiction convention in Macedonia, and it's called Days of Science Fiction. At the very beginnings, it lasted a whole week. Later, I mean, furthermore, like sometimes we organize it for 3 days, and it always varies, but it depends on the content that we are presenting each year. So since the establishing in 1986, 2 years later, the idea for Macedonian Award for Contribution in Science Fiction was born and established, and ever since that award is given every year to prominent authors, domestic and foreign, for contribution and promotion in a way of the science fiction as a genre. Now, on these conventions, we have exhibition, occasionally music artists that take place to enrich the cultural program. And so far, since the beginning, over 200 artists, both domestic and foreign, presented their work. And few of those most prominent award recipients were Arthur C. Clarke, Sam J. Lundwall, and Brian Aldiss, which was a personal guest, I may add. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it for the brief history of science fiction activities in Macedonia. So thank you.
Thank you, Dimitri. With your presentation concludes our second part of the program. All the countries have presented their information. So now we can start the session of question and answer session. And I will start asking each of you a question: in which way the state is supporting or promoting science fiction and fantasy in your country? Do you have any kind of financial or otherwise other types of support from the state?
I can answer that for Serbia, if you like.
Yes, please do.
Right, in next to no way. Because insofar as I know, there is no systemic funding of any kind of fantasy or science fiction. But there is a, libraries will buy books from publishers, and those books will sometimes be science fiction books, more often, far more often fantasy books by Serbian authors. So there is a little financial incentive. And also you cannot film anything really without help from public funds here in Serbia. So whatever gets filmed probably has had some public support, but individually associations and individual authors get no or next to no support, again, in so much as I know. Other people also said that a lot of authors are self-published. The same goes for Serbia. And again, when you're not self-published, you are usually submitting a short story to say a literary magazine or a culture magazine that is often subsidized by the state. So again, there isn't, insofar as I can tell, insofar as I know, maybe I'm wrong, there is no public funding specifically for sci-fi or fantasy, but indirectly, publishers get some aid, and so some of them do publish sci-fi or fantasy. I hope that's good enough for you.
Thank you. Any other any other guests?
I can say how it is in Croatia, if you'd like.
Yes, please do.
Okay, so well, while there is no specific fund for science fiction and fantasy events in themselves, a large percentage of our conventions are partially funded by either local municipalities, by the Ministry of Culture, or by some combination of thereof. Also, as far as publishing goes, all publishers in Croatia have a part of their print runs bought by a state-funded program that then gives them out to libraries and such. So while there is, like I said, no specific direct funding for science fiction fantasy, as in that there is a program specifically for funding such projects are often funded because they fall under cultural events. Also, there are authors in Croatia that have received either government or local stipends for writing. Basically, they give them out a certain amount of money so that they can spend the next 3 or 6 months writing and not having to worry about working, stuff like that. So while it's far from ideal and far from as good as we would like it to be, I mean, the fact that we have all those cons and all those anthologies and such, I think still speaks that there is a certain amount of local and government financing that goes into it and interest. Of course, it's still a very tiny drop in an ocean, but it is something. And I think that the continued success of conventions, which draw more and more people, and some authors that have only in the past year basically sold out their print runs within months, are small but firm steps towards science fiction events in general, and authors as such gaining a bit more credence, a bit more importance year by year. Slowly, unfortunately, but better than nothing, I would say.
Thank you, Igor.
Can I?
Yes, please, Alma.
In Bosnia, sci-fi is not popular genre. We don't have a public help, aid, or anything like that. We don't have an author who write sci-fi in Bosnia. They publish in a region like Serbia, Croatia, or Montenegro, or we have a regional festival, kako se kaže, zbirke, regional books, and we send our story and publish in that way. situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina is, I think, most difficult than other country in South Europe, ex-Yugoslavia. That's all. That's all. I hope that change in future. But we have our neighbor, Serbia, Croatia, and Montenegro, and I think that is very important to kako se kaže, da se družimo, da širimo. We are together in this in writing. Writer is kako se kaže, ono spaja. Connect region. In Bosnian author, Croatian author, Serbian author is connect this region again. That's all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Please, Dragić. I wanted to invite you because I know from first-hand information from you how is the state of affairs in Montenegro.
Yes, our festival organized by local public radio Bijelo Polje, and because of it, Adrijana have that logo behind her, yes. And because radio is public and municipality our partner and support, we also have support from Ministry of Culture for the last 6 years. First 2 years we have support from the sector for NGO and some funds for ungovernmental organization and festival. When we hear something like a Bosnian situation, we are in good position. But about some festival in our country, we have maybe festivals in for children, for young singers, something like that. It is a lot of funds for them, but for similar festival, actually for our festival, we don't have a lot of funds. Because of it, we must do something to change that situation, and we have partners from NGO sector and partners from institution to decrease our costs. And because of it, every year we have a lot of plans, but not every plans we don't realize, because we maybe have 70% of our plans that we realized after the 1 year, because our project not only festival, it's publishing the books that radio shows, and we don't have only one manifestation. We have a lot of activities during the years. But I hope that we have a lot of people who like fantasy, who like science fiction, and we have a lot of organization now who are going to recognize our story, what we do. I think it's okay, but we hope to in the future we have a better time for culture, for festivals, and for science fiction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dragić. Anyone who wants to share?
Maybe I.
Okay, Bojan.
Some little. We get some money from fund of City Celje and some from public fund for cultural activities. This is all about money. we are for this very poor, but we work for our festival and supernova. Thank you.
Thank you, Bojan. It's okay if you get some money. It's better than nothing. So I will say a few things about the situation in Romania. It's quite interesting that I see that all the organizers and promoters from other countries, from your countries, are taking a great length and make huge efforts to gather money from all kinds of sources. The same is in Romania. There is no official fund for supporting science fiction and fantasy as a genre, but the organizers of festivals and conventions try to get support from local municipalities and other regional entities in order to make things possible. So we are going to the municipality. I can say this is the case in Dumbrăvița, where the science fiction and fantasy film festival will take place. Without the support of the mayor office, this festival won't be possible to organize because the costs are huge. Also, we have support from the local business community, not always in funds, not always in money, but in sharing their resources as, let's say, accommodation or food or transportation, all kind of logistics that we need for the festival. So this is the situation in Romania, and I think is commonplace in your countries also. So all is on the shoulders of organizers of events and promoters, if they are promoters or they have some projects to print anthologies or other kinds of magazines. If there is a person who is passionate about science fiction, he will find a way to get funds or other kind of support for his project.
If I may,
Yes.
I probably haven't mentioned it because I don't know the details about event organization and so on and so forth. But I do remember that at least some of the events, the fan events that were held here in Serbia, were in part sponsored by public funds, or at least, you know, advertised in the public media and things like that. So maybe, you know, there is some small media space for fan events especially, but again, I wouldn't exactly know, not in the event organization sort of crew, shall we say.
We are waiting for other questions if you have.
Yes, hi. I have a question. Hi. Thank you all for coming and sharing your lovely presentations about local and national science fiction. They were all great. I suppose that in a certain degree you are all writers of science fiction and fantasy, or maybe you're acquainted with writers from science fiction and fantasy in your countries. And I would like to ask, and I'm curious about, what is the medium circulation of a novel or a short story book after when it's printed and published, and how quickly does it sell or it becomes sold out? because I'm curious about if those numbers are higher or lower than the medium Romanian circulation of any sci-fi or fantasy book published here. Thank you.
So your local authors, in how many copies they are selling to the local public? If they have, let's say, a novel printed or anthology of short stories, how big is the publishing area in your country?
Maybe I can say for Montenegro, we have our publishing short stories about our topics every year, and every year we have a presentation in different town and different festivals. We were at Bojan and Celje in different towns, but in every towns, in every festivals, we don't sell it. It's free of charge, and for these 8 years, we don't sell any books because we have fonts. I mentioned earlier, we have fonts, and we don't, everything we print, we don't sell. But that is our, maybe our next step. We're going to sell online, and that books we already published, and the next that will come, we're going to sell online from online platform.
Okay, but how many do you publish? Sorry, how many do you publish?
Koliko primjeraka? About 500 primjeraka. But we have, this is anthology of Montenegro fairy tales. This is from Faculty of Montenegrin Language from Cetinje. And this is stories is about like with illustration, with something you can see. But this book also don't publish in a lot of copies, and we don't have any data about that selling, because we have authors. It's usually 500. We have authors with novels, with short stories, but that not sell a lot of copies of their books in Montenegro. Okay.
Miloš, maybe you can tell us about the situation in Serbia.
I hope I can. It really depends. I'm having work done at my home. What you see behind me is not my real office, so I can't really get to my bookshelf. But if I remember correctly, a printing of a sort of big name author, like the ones that I've mentioned, one printing is maybe 500, maybe 1,000 books. Some really popular books get several printings, maybe 10 printings at most that I can think of. So suffice it to say, I don't think that very many people in Serbia live from writing anything, and especially not genre fiction, any kind of genre fiction. But some have found some reasonable success. I'd say at most in the thousands. Speaking for myself, I can tell you that it's probably the lower hundreds in my own case, but otherwise, I can't really tell accurately. If a person is looking to be a professional writer, they usually work for magazines or internet media or television or maybe radio, but there's also not a lot of money in there. So there is not a great deal of professional writers, especially professional prose writers of genre fiction in Serbia.
Thank you.
if I may.
Please, Antonija.
Okay. Here, well, it really depends about the publisher. If it's a bigger publisher, there will be more copies, and if it's a smaller publishing, then of course a lower number, but it's usually a few hundred, give or take. So most of it, if it's publications from associations, then they are sold on our conventions. And like Igor said, at SFF you get always a free copy of theirs collection of short stories that they annually published. So I think, well, it's really about the name. Some authors manage to sell out much faster than the others, but there is always a public for this sort of stuff, at least with our juries, that we have to read everything. And Igor, if you have some concrete numbers to share.
Yes, actually, Hungersedam, the publisher I mentioned. So this is one of their latest books by a Croatian author, by Ivana Delic. It's one of their bestsellers. It's one of those that literally sold out within a month or two from of its initial print run, largely thanks to a small but very active group of Croatian book bloggers that actually promoted the book and drummed up interest. So it was, yes, the print run is 300 copies. At the same time, a translated book, Peter V. Brett's The Painted Man, the Croatian translation of it, a very popular book in Croatia. Initial print run, 350 copies. So there's not that big of a difference in print runs between domestic and foreign authors, precisely because, like I said, not a lot of people read science fiction in Croatia. So most of these books it'll take years for them to sell, unless, of course, the author is very popular or book bloggers get involved. And this might, these last few years might actually be a bit of a positive trend, because Hungersedam and others, other publishers are selling more translated books. And there's obviously a growing interest in Croatian authors as well. So it's good.
I mean, a good thing about the genre is that it has a loyal public. Like I remember one of the mainstream publishers saying that it's always somehow easier to market a science fiction or fantasy book because it already has people who read it. It's much easier than some mainstream book that you need to find or make public for it.
Thank you.
Okay, if I may join in.
Sorry.
If I may join in. Sorry, yes. Sorry. Last minute decision. I think it's very important to know in the very start, either you want to start as to make a promotional campaign for yourself, or just to go straight to that corporate part when just interested in financial gain. So I can tell you about my country and how that works actually here. And for example, let's say you have your first science fiction short story ever written, and you want to show the world that you have it and how good you are. And you have two ways to do that. So the first one is either, I mean, today is more easy than ever because you have social media on disposal. So that as a first step helps you in the promotion. So and then you get to go to the NGO sector that actually is in a way kind of like like a middleman in the from the corporate publishing sector and you as an individual, as an author. So, for example, the Vision, the organization I'm from, is actually having this magazine that can print out your stuff. And as an insight that is very important to know is that from the beginning of the magazine, let's say the first issue that Vision had, that was in 1,000 copies made. And for a small country as Macedonia, and even smaller city as well as, you know, and with that, at that time, kind of poor distribution of printed stuff, because it's not just to make it, you know, you have to distribute it and spread it around to people to see it, and of all the corners of the country, you know, to be available for purchase. And at the beginning, I'm saying we had 1,000 copies, and that was more than enough to produce, let's say, fund money for the second copy, for the second issue. So as long as that's okay and it works properly, let's say you make 1,000 copies and you sell 1,000, then you have steps to go forward. And for the next issue, they concluded, I mean, this was a long time ago, I wasn't aware, but then the second issue had 500 copies. So that's half less than the first one. And as time goes by, that energy, that what's hip and what's modern, what you have to have decreases. And believe me if I say this, and today, if you go in Vision and you say, hey, I'd like to purchase the last copy of Vision magazine, believe me, they'll give it to you for free, because it's not even that, it's not hip, if you know what I'm saying. So for you to publish something like that, it's easy. But if you want to make money out of it, you have to go to the already established publishing houses. And those houses have the license to publish your stuff. But in order to get publication there, you have to be quite known name in a way. Like you can go just with one stuff right there, but you have this association like Vision that can help you make a name. So in a way, if you go through that middleman, which is Vision, and you publish 2 or 3 things in a row consecutively, like in a period of 1 year, you have a small opus, a small artwork that you can present to the publishing houses, then they can recognize you more easily as a serious author, and things will go quite better then. And then you can arrive at these publications where you can actually benefit from financially.
Thank you, Dimitrij. Kristi, maybe you will say some words, a few words about the Romanian publishing industry with the commas, of course. Kristi, are you with us or you have problems? Hey. So Kristi, would you say a few words about the Romanian situation with the science fiction and fantasy authors? How many copies they sell and so on? I think Kristi is having problems. Oh, okay, now we hear you. We hear you, but it's not a quality reception. No. You are hearing you, but very not so loud. It's very Yes, please enter again. Yes. I will say a few words, and after that, Kristi Vikol will take the lead in this subject about the science fiction and fantasy authors from Romania. The situation is like this. We have some authors who are self-published, as in other countries, and we have a few publishing houses who are publishing also Romanian authors, because of course, as in your countries, there the translation and big names in science fiction and fantasy are published, and the big publishing houses are the lead in that sector. So, Kristi, please continue. Unfortunately, he has some technical issues and he can't join us. Kristi, are you hearing us? Or maybe Alex Maniu will say a few words about the Romanian scene. Alex,
we can't hear you either.
We can't hear you. Okay,
yes,
now we hear you. Yes.
I seem to have this problem whenever I stick my headphones inside. My mic is jammed. I don't know why. Anyway, so hello everyone, and I'm so glad you're all here. I just had a question. It's basically about language and the similarities and dissimilarities, because as far as I know, like there are many similarities between Serbian, Croatian, Bosnian, and all of these. I have no idea about Macedonian or Slovene, but I was curious if you read each other among the great Yugoslavian divide, if you know each other's work, and in particular, you know, if you read other Yugoslavian literature in science fiction and fantasy, and how great these differences are, because some people say it's almost like the same language. Other scientists and linguists say there's actually a fundamental difference between all of them. So how would you comment on that? Thank you.
It's okay. Everyone heard. I think everyone heard you.
Okay. They're all stunned by my question. Should I?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question actually. So can you please repeat it? Or
yeah, very shortly. Do you read each other? And are there any fundamental differences between Serbian, Croatian, Bosnian, and all the other languages of the former Yugoslavian empire? No. Okay. And are you familiar with each other's works? That was the question, basically. 3 questions, actually.
Can I say that we understand each other no matter which language we speak? We call it Montenegrin, Croatian, Bosnian, Serbian, but we can understand each other very well. But not that situation with Slovenian and Macedonian.
Okay.
We don't can understand each other very well, but we know what they say.
Like, do you read their translations? Do they translate their work?
Yes, we need translation from Slovenian and Macedonian only. But also, maybe in our books, also I have stories in Croatian books, in Bosnian and Serbian books on our language, and that is the same. Maybe linguistic can say we have differences, but we have one origin for everyone languages.
Thank you.
Maybe I think maybe that is the answer.
Right. Yes. To answer for the former Yugoslav Empire,
Yes.
it's probably safe to say that Montenegrin, Serbian, Croatian, and Bosnian are mutually intelligible. But I also any sort of literate person could probably tell whether any text of a length has been written by a person from Serbia, from Croatia, from Bosnia, from Montenegro. Maybe, you know, like you'd have a really good chance of guessing where the writer is from. And as for the first part of your question, I am familiar with Alma's work, and I am familiar with Dragic's work as well. I cannot speak for others, but I will make an effort to familiarize myself with their works as well.
Thank you, Miloš.
I'm also familiar with Alma's and Miloš and Bojan and also Vedrana works. I read every stories on our competition. Some stores go to the book, some of that don't, but I read everything. I must be familiar with that.
Maybe we can speak in our language and you see that we speak the same language. Možemo, we can speak. I speak in Bosnia. Dobro veče.
Možemo da probamo, svi isto razgovaramo.
Se savršeno razumijemo.
As I see from afar, there are some efforts from maybe each of you to make the connection again in this cultural space, because I saw this in Refesticon last year. There were authors from all over the former Yugoslavia, and they are trying to get this anthology of mostly fantasy works and put them together, no matter from where country was issued the short story. So they are trying to revive the old cultural connection between their former Yugoslavian republics. And they are trying also to make an event which will gather all these parties together and revive the science fiction and fantasy scene. But of course, each country has its particularities, and as we saw all in this presentation, each country has some specificity. I saw that in Croatia, the LARP and cosplay is a big game in this scene, and I also wanted to ask if also in other countries this side of pop culture is bringing more people to the science fiction and fantasy scene in their country.
I should probably say definitely. We have any major convention, including the Balkan that I mentioned and several others that I know of, they will have like a cosplay competition or a cosplay review. I know like probably dozens of cosplayers. It just again, it's not exactly my scene, so it's the only reason I hadn't mentioned it. But there are, without any effort, as I said, I probably know like 20 people who do cosplay and regularly on conventions.
Okay, Christy, I think we are hearing you. Maybe you can join now with your finishing touch of your question and talk about the Romanian publishing scene.
If I can just...
yes,
sorry,
yes, Igor.
When you were talking about the reopening the old cultural connections between all the various countries of ex-Yugoslavia, I'd just like to mention that several, especially Serbian and Bosnian authors, have been repeated guests at various Croatian science fiction, both conventions and events. Both Adnan Jašarević from Bosnia and Goran Skrobanja from Serbia were for several years regular guests at the Fantastic Fiction Festival in Istria. And in 2011, which was a year before Sphericon hosted Eurocon, so in 2011, Sphericon had 3 guests of honor. All 3 of them were Serbian writers. So Otto Oltvanyi, Goran Skrobanja, and Darko Tuševljaković. So there is this cross cooperation. I almost said cross-contamination, but that'd be a very bad word.
No, I was afraid this is going to get political, and probably if you said cross-contamination, maybe. I don't know. But yes, of course.
Oh, sorry, Pavle Zelić as well. Yes, I knew.
Yes. Again, these are all, well, in terms of Serbian sci-fi and fantasy and horror fiction, very, very famous people. Anybody who follows the Serbian scene will know of them. I have mentioned Skrobanja specifically, but I have also read a lot of all the other people's works. And I don't know, there has never been, in my understanding, like any major conflict in terms of, you know, like there being major arguments between like fan associations in the region. There's always been cooperation at some level. I mean, say the anthology sort of competitions, they're usually open for writers all over the region, and there's that's been going on for like decades now, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep. Yes. At least in Croatia, I know that some of them are only open to Croatian writers, but there are some that I know that Ubik, the science fiction magazine, from its outset was open to writers from, as we call it, the region here, region. So the entire area of ex-Yugoslavia. And they were amongst the first to not make a big issue out of it, I'd say. So
I also think that the Eurocon, the Futuricon, it's also a big opportunity to all the regional players to come together and present their achievements in the science fiction and fantasy scene. And I think you as former and today's colleagues, you must come together and have presentations about the current state of the science fiction and fantasy in your country at the Eurocon.
And actually, you mentioned cosplay earlier. There is a Serbian association, Valinor, that comes regularly in Croatia to cosplay. And Bana Vukotic has amazing, really, cosplay. You need to look at her. And she was a guest of honor on few of our conventions.
I think you must use this platform of cooperation to enlarge the cooperation with other Balkan states and with Romania, who is in the same cultural area as you. as I know that LARP is a big player in Bulgaria, because I heard from Romanian LARP enthusiasts, they go to Bulgaria and also in Serbia to some events. So I think Romania and your countries and Bulgaria and maybe Greece are a good example of nations and cultural players who can come together and make a regional cooperation in this field, if you are open to this, of course. Okay, maybe now Christy will join us and talk a few words about the Romanian publishing scene.
Yes, hi, thanks. And sorry for the interruption. My boss called, so I had to answer that, always ruining my fun. Basically, you would think and you might say that your average print numbers are small, but in comparison, I would say, and this might come as a surprise, or maybe not, that the Romanian sci-fi scene is even poorer in this department. We have, I think, 1 or 2 large publishing houses which publish sci-fi, and one of them publishes Romanians, and no one is quite sure about the printing numbers, the average printing and the circulation of their editions, not even the authors. And then we have several small ones, which I think the average numbers are in their 100 or 150. That's the maximum. And I'm not even sure that they need more than that, because by our calculations, the people who reads Romanian sci-fi in Romania are about 200 people. That's about it. Though sci-fi is quite popular, but it's obviously probably in your countries as well. It's the Anglo-Saxon science fiction and fantasy, because we have 2 large Comic-Cons, one in Bucharest and one in Cluj, which gathers about, the one in Bucharest I think gathers around 50,000 people. They even had Jason Momoa once invited. I think that was like one of the bigger headliners of this sci-fi and fantasy scenery in Romania. So yeah, and someone said that basically you can't make a living out of writing. Not even the mainstream authors in Romania. I think there's just like 1 or 2 that can survive solely on writing, and not even those. So basically, when it comes to this, I think this is an issue maybe in the entire Eastern Europe, not only in the Balkans and Romania. Maybe only Poland can survive. They have some authors which made it and got translated into English. So yeah, we're basically in the same melting pot of not being read sufficiently and not being published in the numbers we would desire. Anyway, thanks. That was on my part. The last thing I wanted to say is, Igor, that is an awesome T-shirt. It quite reflects our club and our magazine as well. Maybe Darius told you about our sci-fi magazine, the best sci-fi magazine in Romania, the most read sci-fi magazine in Romania, Galaxy 42. Thank you.
If Christy spoke about our magazine, Galaxy 42, as the foreign liaison person, which I am, I invite you all to take the word to your country, your authors of your science fiction and fantasy authors in your country, and to invite them from our part to send short stories to be reviewed by our editors and probably published in our magazine. It's only an online magazine, but as Christy said, it's the online magazine, science fiction and fantasy online magazine with the largest circulation in the Romanian fandom. And I must challenge the number that was put down by Cristi Vicol, that only 200 people are reading science fiction and fantasy in Romania.
I specifically said Romanian authors.
Okay, he meant
People
to say
who
that these
read...
are the hardcore of the readers in Romania, and Romanian authors usually sell around 100 or 200 copies from their the most known authors sell, but even more. We have in our club Daniel Timario, which unfortunately couldn't come to this meeting, and he is also a crime writer. And I must say that crime is a much popular genre in Romania than science fiction and fantasy. And if we are to compare science fiction and fantasy, it is obvious that fantasy is the most popular genre than science fiction. And I heard that in some of your countries, the situation is the same. So fantasy is more popular. Okay.
Yeah, like what Cristi is saying is that there are basically more Romanian science fiction writers than Romanian science fiction readers of Romanian science fiction writers.
If you are to say cynical about this situation, yes, we can say that.
Can I just ask all the
yes,
attendees today, has anyone attended the 2010 Polish Eurocon? No? No?
Hard silence is over us all.
All right, because there was an incredible...
I was still in school, I think. I was in university, so probably unlikely to have traveled abroad.
Sad. It was a smashing party with Serbians and Croatians. We played Bielo Dugme until we got sloshed completely and went to sleep. So that was the best encounter with Serbian/Croatian/Bosnian science fiction I ever had. It was 10 years ago in Czechia, Poland. Ask around.
I probably know many of the people who were with you, but I wasn't there myself.
Ask them. The crazy guy with the guitar playing Bielo Dugme and drinking vodka. Okay, thank you.
I think the best way to reopen this kind of cultural cooperation between our country is to stay put and wait all this crazy thing about COVID-19 to disappear or maybe fade out. And after that, I think we must make some effort to organize some kind of regional convention, science fiction and fantasy regional convention, because as Alex said, we in Romania are big fans of Bielo Dugme and all kind of Serbian and Roma music. So I think we have this common ground to establish personal relationship between us and have a good time drinking all kind of local bread, alcohol drinks. So I think in this way we can make new relations and strengthen all the relation between our fandoms. It's an invitation to you all to consider this proposal to make a regional convention and invite all the parties in this area to participate.
Cross-contaminate themselves.
Yes, cross-alcohol contaminate ourselves. Yes.
Probably doable.
Listen, Romanians, it doesn't matter. I know there's been differences in the former Yugoslavia, but Romanians are extremely fond of every one of you, because during the hardship of the communist era, we looked towards Yugoslavia and we got a lot of product from there. There was a contraband which made us survive. And we watched Yugoslavian television, which was amazing and great, especially here in Timisoara. And we ate tsipiripi, and we got jeans, and we got vegeta, which is the condiment for the soup. And there isn't anyone here in my hometown and their hometown, because we share the same place, which does not remember fondly our relation with the former, well, Yugoslavia, and with each and every country, obviously, which exists today.
I was just typing that we have an English section of our magazine. You have the link in the chat section, and I invite you to visit our English section, because you will have there not only materials with information and reviews, but also some short stories.
Yes, and speaking of short stories, you've invited me, that is, to contribute some of the Serbian contemporary sci-fi for your magazine, and I am working on those translations, I promise.
Thank you.
But I would like to invite all the people present to, well, during the COVID lockdown, we started a podcast called Priča za svaku noć, with stories, well, like sort of riff on good night stories, but they're not really good night stories. But we sort of read stories by local and regional authors. Alma has a couple on, I believe, and so do I. So if you would like to contribute a story, find us on Facebook, Priča za svaku noć. I'll tap it down in the chat, and maybe if the editor likes your story, maybe we'll find somebody to read it out for people who like listening to fiction.
Thank you for the invitation. And
if I may say,
yes,
just Dragić, turn off the audio. We get some money from West Balkan Fund this year, and there will soon be open call for all of you to send short stories, and we will probably publish it on English, but you can send stories on your own languages, and then we can translate them into English. Topics is also about Illyrians, but we will send to all of you more info about that new call, which was, as I mentioned, funded by West Balkan Fund.
Adriana, please send us, please send me an email with the details about this call when they are available, and I will pass on the information in our science fiction and fantasy authors community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I think the hours are late, and now at the end of our international session, which I like very much, I invite you all to say a few words at the end of this meeting. I will call you, and because I think it's more appropriate, and you will say, please, some words. So, Alma.
Thank you for the invitation. I said hello, everyone, guests, and who watch and participate. And I put a Facebook page.
Thank you. Antonija?
Well, thank you very much. And it was really, really interesting being on something like this and listening to all of your presentations. So thanks.
Thank you.
I hope I will see and meet some of you live on some convention one day when finally everything comes back to normal.
You bet. Okay, thank you, Antonija. Igor?
Like Antonija said, thank you for this opportunity. This was the first time for me to do something like this. I think it was for Antonija as well. And I can only echo her sentiments that I hope to see all of you at some future convention or event in Croatia, especially Miloš, where we can continue to cross-contaminate our cultures.
Thank you, Igor. Miloš?
Again, thank you all for, thank you, Darius, especially for organizing this. Thank you for the invitation. I hope I haven't made any, haven't committed any offense in omission of my very good friends and some very popular authors who may have slipped my mind. But as I said, we have an active scene, so I may have forgotten some people inadvertently. And to my Romanian friends, mulțumesc pentru atenție.
Mulțumim și noi pentru participare. Thank you for your participation. Okay, I see that Bojan is no longer connected. So Adriana, please say a few words.
I can say just a second.
Yes, if you have headphones,
I would like to thank you, Darius, for invitation and organization of this very important event for all of us. It was a great opportunity to see these familiar faces and to meet a new one. I hope that there will be a chance to see all of you here in Bielopolje in Montenegro in October 2020, or maybe on Eurocon, which will be held this year in Rijeka in Croatia. I hope that there will soon be some chances to cooperate live. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. And finally, but not last, Dimitrij.
Yes, thank you for the invitation. I hope I made a decent presentation, although when I asked for needed material to present, Ljupcho from Vision sent me 200 pages of Word documents, so I said, all right, this is not gonna do. But I believe that's the best part, because when we meet, we can actually continue the discussion in more details and expand the conversation, because it's not just what we said as in literature or in art form. There is also many other elements in the society that actually help for the science fiction, like many studios who work on video games or in board games, cosplay, also animation. There are two companies here in Macedonia who work on visual effects for science fiction movies. So that actually it's also a part of the science fiction world that we're living today. And that's all just the best discussed, in 4 eyes. So first chance we meet, we're gonna do that. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dimitrij. And now, at the finish of our session, as an organizers, please accept my most deep appreciation that you have participated in this meeting. Thank you all for coming together. Thank you all for your time and effort to make the presentation. And I hope this meeting will be the first of other meetings that we will participate, not only in online form, which is much easier and cheaper than seeing us in real life, but we must say, and we must realize that face-to-face contact and getting together is one of the most important way to interact as a human beings and as a cultural beings that we are. So I think all of you will agree that it is best to just wait a few months, and maybe is a practical time frame that next year is the year we will get together and have a meeting. We don't know, maybe at the Eurocon. We'll see in Italy, which is rather close to you and to us, or any other regional or local convention that are organized by any of us or other parties not presenting here in our session. So thank you again. It was a very nice evening, and please promote this gathering to all of our fandom, and we hope that in the future events like this we will have a much larger participation from the fandom community.